Hey guys, this is Austin, and these are 10 things you need to know about the brand new Galaxy S20. Number 1 is a big one, the price. So the brand new Galaxy S20 starts at $1,000, and that's for the base model. So the Galaxy S20 starts at that $1,000 price point. If you want to go up to the S20 Plus, it's $1,200, although it can go higher based on if you want more storage. And then to top it all off, you have the S20 Ultra at $1,400. And it also has a higher end model. Now to help counteract this, they do actually have the standard S10e, S10, S10 Plus from last year still around, and they're all getting a $150 price cut. But when you put all this together, there's certainly nothing wrong with an expensive phone. I mean, the iPhone 11 Pro is a great example of that. But when we're talking about $1,000 plus for these new flagships, they had better bring some serious features. Thankfully they do, but I mean, you better be prepared to pay. Number 2 is actually a legitimate feature that does help justify the price, and that is the 120 Hz display. Now by default, all 3 of the Galaxy S20s will run at full HD resolution and 60 frames per second, very much like last year. However, you do have the option of bumping all of them up to that full 120 frames per second. After spending a lot of time with the OnePlus phones of last year with their 90 Hz displays, it does make a big difference. Now, yes, I will completely admit that going from 90 to 120 frames per second is probably not going to be a big deal, but considering that pretty much everyone who's going to be upgrading to these S20s is coming from a standard 60 frame per second display, it is so much smoother. Although, it's not necessarily that straightforward. The issue is that you can't have your resolution and your frame rate at the same time. So all 3 devices have QHD displays, which look great, but if you want to run it at full resolution, you have to run it at only 60 frames per second. The 120 option only exists when you're running at full high definition. Now 1080p is not bad on, say, the S20, which has actually a fairly nice 6.2-inch display. Once you jump up to the S20 Plus, and specifically the Ultra with its ridiculous 6.9-inch display, HD just doesn't quite cut it. It is noticeably softer, and while I personally love that super smooth 120 frames per second action, you're actually making a legitimate sacrifice with that. Now, is it something that I will personally do? Yeah, probably, but it really shouldn't be the way it is on a $1,400 phone. Now, if I can just shamelessly plug something for a second, my brand new podcast went live this morning called The Test Drivers. In it, we talk a lot more in depth about the Galaxy S20, as well as a lot of the things such as the screen, which are slightly nefarious trade-offs. So it's co-hosted by my good friend Mike Hurley, and on The Test Drivers, what I really want to do is go much more in depth than I can in a 10-minute YouTube video, right? So the podcast is really there to not only talk much more in depth about technology, but also about what it means to actually daily drive something, right? Because these S20s seem very interesting, and as you'll see later in the video, there's a lot of really cool features. But at the end of the day, it's one thing to do a hands-on, it's another thing to actually spend time really living with these devices. So if that sounds interesting to you, or you just want to be a supporter, please go give The Test Drivers a try. It's available at the link in the description, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple Podcasts, wherever, or you can just go check it out at relay.fm/thetestdrivers. Reason number 3 is 5G. So while this is technically not new this year, there was an S10 model with 5G last year. However, it was very limited and only a few people actually bought it. However, this time, every single Galaxy S20 you can buy has 5G built in. Well, technically. So right now, there are a couple of competing 5G standards. There's one known as Sub-6, as well as there's millimeter wave. So Sub-6 is becoming fairly popular, specifically here in the United States, thanks to T-Mobile. So they've actually already turned on their full 5G network, and this is essentially an evolution of the 4G speeds that we have today. Coverage is very similar, and the speeds are better, but say it's the difference between like 40 and 80 megabits per second. It's good, but it's nothing completely revolutionary. Other carriers, such as AT&T and Verizon here in the States, are focusing on their millimeter wave 5G. Now this is where you get those crazy speed tests of a gigabit per second or more. However, it comes with a major downside. The coverage is incredibly limited. Like literally, you could walk around the corner and go from a gigabit down to like nothing with this. So really the best case scenario for 5G is to have a phone which supports both millimeter wave and Sub-6, sort of the best of all worlds. And that is what you get, except not on the standard S20. So the way it breaks down is like this. The standard Galaxy S20 only supports Sub-6 5G, which is fine, and it's really enough for most people. However, when you go up to the S20 Plus as well as the Ultra, they support not only Sub-6, but also that millimeter wave, which means that you can get way faster speeds, but in very limited situations. It's really a future-proof play, but that's, I think, a legitimately really big selling point for that new S10 or S20 Plus and S20 Ultra. Really what you're getting here is something which should look much better into the future, but you also have to deal with the fact that, well, you spend $1,000, you get 5G, but it's not full 5G, because that's not confusing, right? Now with a 120 Hz display and standard 5G, my next favorite point is a really obvious one: battery life. So while yes, the S10 had decent battery life, the S20 bumps it up in a big way, at least on the battery size of the equation. So the S20 has a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, the S20 Plus has 4,500 milliamp hours. If you go up to the S20 Ultra, it's a thick boy with 5,000 milliamp hours of battery capacity. Now that sounds really impressive. It's much better than what we got last year, but the issue is that with that power-hungry screen and a 5G radio inside, you're probably gonna need that. So while I haven't had enough time to actually do any kind of real battery life tests, I would be surprised if the battery life is actually anything all that impressive. I really do feel like these bigger batteries are probably purely there just to power all these new features, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. That said though, I'm glad they at least decided to increase the battery size and not just throw all these fancy new things at you and go, oh yeah, charge it in 3 hours. Ah, what a beautiful fountain to go on to our number 5 point, the zoom. So cameras, of course, are a huge component of every modern smartphone. When it comes to the S20, things get a lot closer, a lot more zoomed, and we're zooming in on the truth. So the standard S20 as well as the S20 Plus have a 3 times telephoto zoom, which is much better than the 2 times of last year. However, what really takes the cake is the S20 Ultra with a massive 10 times optical zoom. Yes, 10 times. It's a lot of times. Now, funnily enough, Samsung actually claims this to be 100 times space zoom on the back of the camera. Now, this is a slight exaggeration, as to get to 100 times zoom, they're making a combination of that 10 times optical zoom as well as a lot of digital zoom. It's not exactly as great as it sounds. However, you can get some super tight shots with it. Now, unfortunately, I can't actually show you any of these shots because the phone I was testing was using pre-release software, so I can't actually pull any images off of it. The results were good, certainly not as good as a full 100 times zoom camera, but this is hands down, as far as like standard flagships of today, the best looking zoom lens I've ever seen. A big reason for that is actually because they flipped the entire thing on its side. So when you look at the zoom camera, it's actually looking through a prism, so the camera lens is actually sideways in the phone. This actually has some other sort of effects that I'll talk about a little bit later, but essentially what you're getting here is a zoom which is pretty much unmatched by any iPhone or Pixel or LG or Asus or, right now Asus actually has the Zenfone zoom. It's a really good zoom. Number 6 is a big one. It is 8K video, which is standard across the board for the S20. Now, there's actually something really impressive about this. While yes, it is certainly not as good as the 8K video that you would get on, say, a Red camera, but what it is a major step up, at least in actual real pixels. When you consider that 4K is 8 megapixels and 8K is 33 megapixels, that is a lot of data to process on a phone video camera. Now, there are some limitations. So the 8K video only records at a maximum of 24 frames per second, which is the correct frame rate anyway, but that is a little bit of a downside for some people. But I think the bigger downside is the fact that you can only record on certain cameras because you have to have enough megapixels to do it in the first place. So on the S20 and the S20 Plus, you have to use the 3 times optical zoom lens, the telephoto camera, to actually be able to record, since those are the only cameras with more than 33 megapixels. That's fine, although honestly it's a little bit of a major downside, just because when you're trying to record 8K video, you are very zoomed in. However, when you go up to the S20 Ultra, the main wide-angle camera has a ridiculous 108 megapixels, and I'll talk about that in a second. But you can use that main wide-angle camera to record 8K video, which personally I think looks a lot better. The downside here, though, is that when it comes to recording 8K video, you really have major limitations. It's a nice thing to have, it looks decent, but at the end of the day, based on at least my initial first impressions, it's still probably not as good as, say, like the 4K on an iPhone. Now, number 7 might not sound like a big deal, but just hear me out here. It is the camera sensor size. Now, we all know that at this point, when it comes to buying a new smartphone, camera is one of, if not the top priority. Not only if it means you're upgrading from your last phone, or even you're just shopping between like the Pixels and the iPhones of the world, the camera matters a lot. Now, while a lot of the advances that we've seen over the last couple years really come down to software, at a certain point there's no sort of substitute for just a bigger, better camera sensor, and that's exactly what Samsung have done this year. So the standard camera on the S20 and S20 Plus is 1.6 times bigger, which, to be clear, was already pretty big last year. However, what really takes the cake is the S20 Ultra. Its main 108 megapixel camera is almost a full 1-inch sensor, or 1.33-inch sensor to be specific, but it's really approaching something like a compact camera like the Sony RX100. Now, this means that the image quality should not only be better across the board. Now, I know that they use a weird 9 times pixel bending process, so even though you have 108 megapixels, it's taking all that information and putting it into a very sharp looking 12 megapixel photo. But put that aside, and what you should have here is what I think is a real candidate for the best phone of the year. Best camera on a phone of the year. That. Number 8 is a big one, literally. The S20 Ultra is a thick boy in the truest sense of the word. Not only is it significantly thicker thanks to that huge battery compared to the standard S20, but on top of that, it is heavy, and the camera bump is really, really tall, mostly because of that 10 times optical zoom camera. Now, come on, we've all been there, we've all had a thick boy in our lives, but the real issue with the S20 Ultra is that all of this thickness is combined with a 6.9-inch screen. Look, this is a big phone. It's a big phone in every sense of the word. It is also a big phone in the sense that it is a very powerful, very battery hungry, it's a monster, right? It's really a step above anything like the S20 or the S20 Plus. But the downside though is that for me, I can't really handle 6.9 inches in my hand. Number 9 is simply the fact that these phones are significantly more powerful than last generation. So while we don't actually have, as of recording this video, the official spec of what's inside beyond a 7nm next generation processor, but it is almost certainly going to be the Snapdragon 865 here in America, in North America, and the Exynos 990 in other parts of the world. So really what you're getting here is not only a very powerful processor, but also a lot of RAM. These guys all have 12 gigs of RAM across the board. However, on the Ultra, you can opt it up to 16 gigabytes of RAM. Yes, that's more than most people's laptops. Now, there are a couple actual legitimately really nice uses for this. So even on the 12 gig of RAM phones, you have an option to lock up to 3 apps in memory so that it will not close them off in the background. And on the 16 gigabyte RAM option, you've got 5 apps that you can keep open at once, which is, is that a lot? Or should you have more than 5 apps that are permanently open in RAM? I guess it's kind of a nice thing to have. But anyway, when they're charging you $1,000, they gotta find a way to justify it somehow, right? Meanwhile, the iPhone sells 4 gigs of RAM, and Samsung's shipping 12 and 16 gigs. Just saying. Actually, I don't know what I'm saying, because it's not really relevant. Android just eats up memory. It's fine. At number 10, we have good and bad news. As this time around, we still have the micro SD card slot, which can support up to an additional 1 terabyte of storage. But sadly, the headphone jack is no more. Can you see it? Can you get really close there? Goodbye, Jack. It was nice knowing you.
He's been gone.
No, he was on the S10 last year.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, feels like it was a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. He's moved on to greener pastures, like Unbox Therapy's channel. And again, definitely don't forget to go check out the test drivers at the link in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel because, of course, this is not the only Samsung news of today. Or maybe it is, but I don't think so. I think there's something else we might be able to talk about. This is the universal sign for flip phone, right?